Hello, and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 60, Thursday, June 3rd, 2021.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm joined, as always, by the Jasper to my Horace, my lovely co-host, Emily.
Partners in crime until the end. Hello, everyone. Happy to be back to talk about a young adult novel. Courtney, it's been a while since we've done this genre.
Yeah, I'm excited to return to it as well. In honor of the recent release of Cruella, we're reading the young adult novel released as a tie-in to the film Hello, Cruel Heart by Maureen Johnson. Would you care to give us a description of the book?
Sure. So here's a synopsis from the Amazon description. Swinging London, summer 1967. 16-year-old Estella, gifted with talent, ingenuity, and ambition, dreams of becoming a renowned fashion designer. But life seems intent on making sure her dreams never come true. Having arrived in London as a young girl, Estella now runs wild through the city streets with Jasper and Horace, amateur thieves who double as Estella's makeshift family and partners in petty crime. How can Estella dedicate herself to joining the ranks of the London design elite when she's sewing endless costumes and disguises for the trio's heists? When a chance encounter with Magda and Richard Moresby Plum, two young scions of high society, vaults Estella into the world of the rich and famous, she begins to wonder whether she might be destined for more after all. Suddenly, Estella's days are filled with glamorous parties, exclusive eateries, flirtations with up-and-coming rock stars, and of course, the most cutting-edge fashion money can buy. But what is the true cost of keeping up with the fast crowd? And is it a price Estella is willing to pay? So that's our synopsis from Hello, Cruel Heart by Maureen Johnson. And this book was released on April 6, 2021 by Disney Publishing Worldwide. The book is, quote, an electric new story of teenage Cruella de Vil, an original novel inspired by the upcoming Walt Disney Studios live-action film Cruella, end quote. So overall, where this book is placed, it is a prequel to the prequel of 101 Dalmatians. So we're getting an origin story of an origin story. And here we go, a little bit more about Maureen Johnson. If you are familiar with her, she is a #1 New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of several young adult novels. When I looked up her list, I believe it's around 24.
Oh, wow.
And this includes her most famous 13 Little Blue Envelopes, Sweet Scarlet, The Name of the Star, and Truly Devious. She has also done collaborative work such as Let It Snow with John Green and Lauren Miracle, now on Netflix, and several works in the Shadowhunter universe with Cassandra Clare. Her work has appeared in publications such as the New York Times, BuzzFeed, and The Guardian, and she also has served as a scriptwriter for EA Games. She has an MFA in writing from Columbia University and currently lives in New York. So she's actually, I did a little more digging. She is local to my neck of the woods, was born and raised in Philadelphia, and completed her undergraduate at the University of Delaware. So local to our side of the country, Courtney, in Northeast on the East Coast. And the name didn't jump out at me at first, but once I read her bio, I read 13 Little Blue Envelopes when I was in high school. While it wasn't one of my favorite young adult novels, it was fun because as someone who had never been out of the country, here is a whole story about a teenage girl running around Europe, following clues and getting to try different foods and seeing all the sights around Europe. So it was really fun for me. So if you enjoyed any of her books, I think you're going to like Hello, Cruel Heart.
Cool. I am not as familiar with her work, I'll admit. I haven't dabbled in the young adult genre as much. I feel like my young adult exposure many years ago was Gossip Girl and those types of series. And then I quickly moved into like memoirs and biographies. So I like when we get to do something a little different on this show and go into a genre that I am not as well versed in.
Yeah, so this is really fun. And I don't think we've done a young adult novel on this show. Oh, goodness. When was the last young adult novel we did?
October.
Probably Twisted Tales.
Yep. Not too long ago, about, what,
So this
8
is
months?
for our young adult fans. And it's good. I miss sprinkling these into my reading repertoire. They're fun. So let's get into the book here. Overall impressions.
Yeah, I liked this. As I said, it's not my go-to, and it definitely had a young adult feel to it, but I liked that this was something independent of the film. We recently talked with Jeff Topali about the junior novelization of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and that's essentially a retelling of what transpires on the screen. We noted some discrepancies just in, you're working on the script, trying to tie it to the movie coming out, but this happens right in between maybe the first 10 minutes of the film. Like, if you were to expand that out into a script, it would be this portion of the text. So I enjoyed getting to explore Cruella's world a little more. I got to see the film before I read the book, and I know you read the book before seeing the film, so it'll be interesting to compare that as well. What were your impressions?
I too had a lot of fun reading this, and I like that we got a book that helped us prepare and like get excited for the film versus getting a novelization right away of Cruella, because then that would have spoiled the film. So I like that we had some playroom here, because unlike the junior novelization or a novelization of, I know there is a novelization of Cruella that's now out, when you are trying to tie it to the film, like we saw with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, you're trying to write that at the same time the movie's being done. You might have some struggles, but because this comes even before the film, and we know where she ends up because we have the animated 1961 101 Dalmatians, it kind of felt like she had so much room to play, because she also kind of knew where this character had to go at the same time. So I saw those connections. So that was nice to kind of connect to what we already know, because you already have those questions in your head of, well, what got Cruella to be obsessed with fur or fashion? Like what happened to her that made her her? So I had a lot of fun with this, and I did like getting to read it before seeing the film.
Yeah, I could see how either approach would work. If you've already seen the film and you really enjoyed it, this is fun to immerse yourself a little further in her backstory, in her world, look at her from a different age point than she is in the film, because she's a little younger here. But if you haven't seen the film, it's not going to really spoil too much. I'd say like the first few pages align with the prologue of the film. But Emily, did you feel that like spoiled anything for you in a way?
Not for me. In fact, I was kind of like, I felt like I was in the know a little bit. So watching, I had a group of friends, had a nice vaccinated friend party at my house. There was about 6 of us to watch it, and I felt like I was in the know a little bit. And I kind of like, because with the film, and we're going to talk about the film a little bit, after that first 15 minutes, we jump right to the 1970s, where this takes place in the 60s. So like you said, it didn't really spoil too much, because this book takes place pretty much in between the prologue of the film and where we see Emma Stone for the first time.
Yeah, the film, I know that it clearly says that it jumps 10 years. I couldn't quite place if like maybe she's 11 or 12 and now she's in her early 20s in the film, because she goes to change up her hair a little bit, and then the younger girl transforms into Emma Stone. So in between that moment is where our book takes place. She is 16 at the time of the book, which I think is perfectly appropriate for a young adult novel. Most readers are going to be in that age range. But even us being more than 10 years older than that character, I still found myself swept up in it. So let's talk about the characters and the characterizations. I'd love to know what you think we learn about the characters in this book, and how does it compare to the characters that we already know from the animated film?
Right. So I'm going to be careful here to compare just the animated film first, because that's what I came in reading this. Like I said, I read the book before seeing Cruella. So we have Estella and Cruella. So through the book, Estella is the Cruella that we know. So reader or listeners, if you haven't seen the film, this might be a change that we're going to mostly say Estella. In that case, we mean Cruella before she is who we know as Cruella. And I really like this character because, I don't know, I feel like Cruella has to come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
While I think a lot of her personality was something she always had, what we get in the animated film of ready to kidnap puppies and turn them into a coat, I'm like, that just doesn't just come out of nowhere. So I really enjoyed getting to know her story. So I like that while Estella is a go-getter, she's innovative, she's spunky. The times that she's in Harrods and she's thieving and pulling her heists with Jasper and Horace, but she really plays out her scenes to carry through her characters in these heists. That was really fun to read. But I like that she's tempered also with very practical teenager feelings.
Yes.
She has insecurities, and we get to hear from her internal monologue about those. She has doubts, especially when she transitions into a new crowd. And I think there's a lot of relatable here that while we might not be from 1967 London and I may not be a fashion designer, I do remember what it's like to meet new friends. I do remember it's like to confront, someone that you have a crush on and finding out that they might like you too. Like there's a lot of relatableness here too. And I really like that for Estella / Cruella. It made her a little bit more human, and I don't know about sympathetic, because from the animated film, we get real far. But in her origins, you can sympathize a little bit.
I was going to say, I feel that she's an authentic teenage girl in that regard. She was well written. I mean, there's, some aspirational elements to her, and the fact that she's a fashion designer, you can get swept in I'd love to, maybe have that talent. But the emotions that she wrestles with throughout the conflicts of the book feel authentic, and that is a much deeper layer than we get from the animated film.
Now, what did you think about Jasper and Horace? I thought they were more fun in the book. I like them so much better in the book, and then we'll talk about the film.
I feel they're sympathetic as well, because in the movie, the animated film, they're just her goons. They're there for comic relief. They're not the most dependable henchmen. They're busy watching the telly rather than carrying out what they're supposed to do. But here you see an actual friendship between them and dynamics. I mean, there's a point where the synopsis kind of hints she's getting swept up in this other world and considering leaving them behind. And I felt that conflict was authentic as well. Like, they were hurt by the way that she was treating them and behaving. So you see some repercussions of the way that they interact with each other.
I also think they were more developed as people. Like you said, in the animated film, they are just the comic relief. You don't know much about them. Their personalities are pretty one-dimensional. Whereas I really like that this Jasper and Horace, again, someone you can kind of relate to. And they're also not puppy haters right now. I don't know what it is. The fact that there's no, get the puppies really at all in this book makes this a lot easier to get through. So I like Jasper and Horace in a way. They're kind of they reminded me a little bit of Oliver and the Artful Dodger, where they're this tag team. Whereas maybe together they're the Artful Dodger because they bring Estella in. And I thought it was an interesting piece that they teach her everything she knows. They are the ones that taught her. Eventually she becomes the leader and the mastermind, but I kind of like that they had a little bit more of a parental role here, or brotherly role here.
Yeah, I love your comparison to Charles Dickens, because they are all orphans and they band together. And Estella as a woman, or a younger girl in this case. You know, she has an innocence about her that helps them in their thievery versus, you know, sticking out. Like, she's a little more sympathetic for police or people who are after her, so they recognize her value in that. But it is interesting to see the power shift, and that's something that happens in the newer movie. But I wanted to give kudos to Maureen Johnson, because I picked up on something it's not in the new live action film, but we'll get into a little bit of how we came about this topic as we get to the film. But with Jeff DePaoli on Disney Coast to Coast, I got to read 101 Dalmatians, the original book, and the book talks about her love of pepper and like using that to season her food. Like, that's just something very distinct about her character in Dodie Smith's original novel. And I saw that peppered in here as well, pun intended. So I thought that was a nice small link to even the very heart of the root of the character, which is the book that inspired the film.
I like that we get some of her quirks. We get some of her, it's not just she loves fashion. I feel like we got to know that so well from the 1996 live action, which I know you and Jeff talked about all of the versions of 101 Dalmatians. Because in the animated film, all we know about Cruella is that she loves fur. She's not necessarily a fashion designer. So I feel like what Estella becomes is kind of a hybrid of all of the other versions so far. Of 1996, Cruella is a fashion designer. She loves fashion. We have that eventually she's obsessed with fur. Here we don't have the fur obsession yet. That's kind of what we miss. So I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but where this book leaves off, where Cruella the film leaves off, something happens in that gap in time when she goes on the puppy fur coat rampage, where she suddenly becomes obsessed with fur.
Well, I'm okay that we don't get that, because we know who this character is, like who she becomes, this evil villain. I had shared with Jeff, I think she's truly one of the most evil villains. She doesn't have magical powers. She has just this very dark desire to kill puppies. What I wanted from this film, and then this tie-in book as an extension, is I don't want an excuse for her actions to try and say, oh, that's why she wants to kill puppies. I just wanted a deeper look into her character. Again, not excusing her actions. I feel like that's a bit what the Maleficent film tried to do. Like, oh, you don't know the real story behind it, or like what Wicked, the Broadway musical, does. And this is not that. Both the book and the film are more just like, here's how she's crazy and has almost this split personality. We're not excusing it. We're just showing you some of the additional layers.
Let's talk about some other characters. So we get a few characters that are exclusive to the book that then do not transition into the film, but they are a big part of her early years, and that is Peter, Magda, and Richard. Who do you want to tackle first?
Let's talk about Peter, because he's an absolute fluff and stuff boy, and I have a beef with Peter.
Let's hear the hot takes. Let's hear the beef with Peter.
Well, I mean, it's very young adult relationship type thing. You can probably see where it's going from a mile away. She's falling in love with this boy, but he's a rock star in an up and coming British band, so I'm like, that's not gonna work out for her. But I did like being taken on their romantic journey, because it put myself back in, you know, being in high school, being a teenager, having a crush, and then maybe things don't exactly, you know, you have great moments, but then things don't go as planned, and having those moments of heartbreak. So I want to give Maureen credit for writing something that felt authentic in that way. But Peter's a fluff and stuff boy, and whatever, he can just go away.
So my only issue with the writing of Peter was I felt like that transition from he seems too good to be true to we get the evidence that he's a fluff and stuff boy was very quick. I kind of wanted to see some more evidence sprinkled throughout that, like, he didn't return a call, or he came like way late to a date or something. Like, he almost, I get where like he, like, you knew it was coming, but I kind of wish we had a little bit more evidence, because I wanted to see Estella like make more excuses in her head, because that's a big turning point for her, is that she really values these new friends And that's a really big lesson to her, is that coming from, I don't know, that's a big lesson for her, that you can't trust everybody. Friends are not always good friends. And I feel like we got that more with Magda and Richard, where we saw their faults more. And she kept making excuses for those, which then eventually blows up in her face. Whereas Peter, we didn't get as much of the making excuses for him.
But I felt that that was real, because when you have a crush like that, you have those rose-colored glasses. So I don't think that that was necessarily needed. But
Okay.
I understand your feeling that it was an abrupt turn. I don't know. I just felt like I was like, I know where this is going, so I didn't need to have
Yeah, like, it didn't
any
surprise me, but I
foreshadowing.
felt like it just kind of happened.
Like, it
wasn't,
wrapped
a
up
weird-
too quickly.
Right, like, there wasn't, like, a weird moment.
Well, there's a build-up
And then it, like-
to it in those chapters. So where we're getting to is she has this crush on this boy. He's a rock star. They kiss. She designs an outfit for him. He writes a song for her. She thinks that he invites her to come along to America on their tour, which would be very convenient because she's all caught up in friendship drama and like stormed out on Jasper and Horace. So she shows up at the recording studio because she's trying to find him and like confirm this is what's happening. And from that moment on, you're like, yeah, no, this isn't going to turn out well, because she's trying to talk to the recording studio manager, and he's like, yeah,
I wanted
see
more
it
of a
all.
build up to that.
Okay.
I thought that was like the beginning of the down, whereas I wanted a little bit more. Somewhere
I feel
in
like it's a relatively short book, so I can see where it felt abrupt. I think when you were reading it, it was like 300 something pages with big text. On my iPad, it was only 173 pages with tiny text. So very much a quick read. I don't know. I was like, I just pegged Peter from the start.
like overall, it didn't, I don't think, affected the overall like
Arc.
purpose of the book. I don't think it didn't affect the arc. She's still, it's all part of the downturn of where all of the friends, which now we'll talk about Magda and Richard, this new world she enters kind of throws her back out. So it was all part of that. I just wanted a little bit more from Peter, or that transition. But Magda and Richard, they're so interesting. They are the like very stereotypical socialites where they just have money. They do nothing. They inherited all of their wealth. Their parents died. So now that they're only 18, because now they get their hands on their trust funds, and they are just living life, shopping every day. Magda gives her closet over like every other week. She turns it over, and just Stella's so happy that she's getting all these hand-me-downs. Richard's a novelist who's never written a novel. He just says he's a writer, but just does research every day, which is they're twins. They throw the fabulous parties. It's just like everything you think of, like it's almost Gatsby-ish.
Yes,
the way that they are, except without the hustle that Gatsby actually has. But like, just think those lavish parties, but make it 1967.
Yes, and they meet Estella in the store when she's trying to steal some fabric, and she's has an eye on them because she recognizes these are high fashion people. They have taste, and so she's up front with them when they're talking. She's like, yep, I'm here to steal fabric, and they think that's just so quirky and delightful. So I'd say they almost adopt her as like their pet of sorts, like, oh, this is our friend of the moment. So they introduce her into society, give her access to people who want Estella to design clothes for them. So very easily, just like with Peter, to get swept up in that world, in that relationship. But they are so vapid and so petty and just empty-headed. But I found it almost comical. I don't know if that was Maureen Johnson's intent, but they were such a characterization that I didn't like them as people, but you're not supposed to, but I still enjoyed that part of the journey.
See, I think her deteriorating friendship with Magda got the better build up.
That's fair.
It was written better because they go on a heist. Magda, I feel like Richard and Magda are the people, they don't like to be bored. and they can very quickly get bored with anything that's even slightly reminiscent of ordinary. So, like you said, they were like fascinated that Estella is a master pickpocket and knows her way around London and sees it in a different way. And so Magda wants to go on a heist. It's literally a rainy day and she's like, I'm bored. Teach me how to lift something. Like, and that's
steal something
like, no.
and lift.
Yeah, steal something, lift. Yeah. And Estelle's like, no, I'm trying to like leave that behind. She's like, we don't need to steal anything. You have the resources. Estella's at this point, very moral. She's really, or at least concocted in her head that she steals to survive.
I felt that was a strong contrast where and I don't see, maybe that was excusing in a way. It's not excusing the whole she wants to kill puppies things, but it was a strong contrast to Magda and Richard when she sees Magda wanting to steal stuff. She's like, no, that's not why we steal. We steal because we can't afford food or bread, and you need to steal things to sell for money. But right now I have money and I'm living the life with you, living in your house. So that was a good contrast.
When Magda basically gets caught and she abandons Estella to get caught in Harrods, and she leaves her there, like that's the beginning, but they have a slight redeeming moment, that moment where she's like, Charlie, it's fine. And like they end up throwing the fabulous party, and Estella's like, okay, they just see the world differently than I do. And then like their friendship's kind of okay again for a few pages, and then it starts that wrap up even with Peter. I thought that was just a better lead up to kind of getting Estella to really realize this world that she's fantasized about. It's not always greener on the other side. I thought that was just a better writing for those characters. And maybe it should have been, because we meet them first. We spend a little bit more time with them. Richard's just, he's not there as
he
much.
Really isn't. I thought that was going to develop into more, initially reading the back cover, I could tell there was going to be a love interest. And I think I initially got the vibe that she was attracted to Richard in the description, and she thinks that Magda and Richard are together, but then, oh, surprise, they're twins. But that really didn't pan out. It becomes much more focused on her friendship with his sister Magda, which I was okay with. I feel like it's a good contrast to show like that mean girl side. So you have a heartbroken boy and a female friendship that falls through.
And I think it's supposed to be that she's trying to replace Jasper and Horace. So you need another pair, and you need another pair that is sibling-like, because they're her brothers and they're like brothers to each other. So if you're going to have two different worlds where you're trying to mimic but replace what you have at the same time, like she needs a Magda Richard. So I get why I think it worked well that they were a pair, because we're replacing Jasper and Horace with Magda and Richard. And then Jasper and Horace are there to fall back and I don't want to say rescue Estella, but bring her back. And I like they didn't rub it in her face too much. They are actually very mature in the book, and even in Cruella, versus what we get in the animated film.
They're very understated characters that were well written in both the book and the film. So yeah, I liked getting layers to them as well.
So moving towards the film, what do you think the purpose or theme of this book is to prepare us for Cruella?
Sure. I feel that it shows how her heart is hardened and kind of sets her up for the life of crime that she's propelled to in the film. I want to say that I liked that the film doesn't have like a love subplot at all, so I was fine getting that here in the book. We get to see a heartbreak. There's really no any hint of like strong romance. I mean, maybe there's some feelings between her and Jasper, or in the way that he looks at her, for sure, but like that did not pan out in the film, and I was glad it didn't, because I felt that would have been a distraction. So I feel it gives us even more backstory, because this is, even though she's a terrible person, a much beloved villain, one of the most iconic. So I felt it gives readers layers to her that aren't present in the film and expands it beyond that. And just going off of the title, Hello, Cruel Heart, she's kind of welcoming the heartbreak by the end, and it shows that she was hardened to who she becomes.
I think it was also important to introduce us to the idea that Cruella is an alter ego in a way, or another personality. because in the film Cruella, we kind of get it in the intro a little bit in an exchange between the mom and Estella, where she's like, put those bad thoughts away. We don't want Cruella saying these things. We want Estella saying these things. So Cruella is the cruel Estella. So like we get that a little bit in the film, and Jasper and Horace now and then reference that's not Estella talking, that's Cruella talking. But I feel like in the book because we get to see her inner dialogue. It's in italics when she's Cruella. We see a little bit more of the back and forth in her head of how she's trying to live up to her mother passes away when she's young. We'll talk about that. Gotta love Disney. There's never a mom. She's more in back and forth of she's trying to be a good person, but she's also trying to handle she has a lot of cognitive dissonance of trying to like she said, like, I only steal to survive, but her stealing and her thefts actually increase. First, it's just food and necessary clothes, but then it's fabric to design her own clothes and money, but she keeps justifying. And then with this new fashion music world, going into things like that.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the italics because it is a very visual representation of the difference between Estella and Cruella. And the italics are emphasizing that these are intrusive thoughts that come into her head that say you're not worthy, or they'll never like you, or even just maybe let's get these people back for what they're doing. So that did make it very clear the difference between Estella and, you know, who she or her mother formerly deemed Cruella, and then leaning into that. There's something I want to touch on as we continue to talk about this book, but wrap it up into the film. I found that this book's concept was a bit similar to another young adult that we read way back in our first season. P.S. Happy anniversary, Emily. We're now on year 3 of the podcast. Oh my gosh. Our
did
fourth
that actually just happen and we didn't realize it?
It did. Well, because we're not on a set schedule. We do it once a month. We started our show and kicked it off back in May of 2018. So very fun. Going back to that first summer, on episode 4, we discussed Beauty and the Beast Lost in a Book by Jennifer Donnelly. And did you think of that book as well while reading this one?
Honestly, I did not.
Okay.
But you and I then started talking about it because you texted me about this, and it kind of makes it has an ambiguous ending. So in that way, it's kind of similar, or it has an ending where we know it moves forward, but it's not anything like definite.
Yeah, I mostly thought of it because, one, it's a young adult tie-in to a film, so that was released along with the 2017 Emma Watson Beauty and the Beast, and very much takes place in that film specifically. I mostly thought of it because it's something that takes place within part of the movie, but is not actually in the plot of the movie. That's where I was going with it.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, so Lost in a Book is when she's exploring the fact that she has access to this magical book
in the library.
You only see once in the film. But yeah, so same here, Cruella, we're kind of getting that splice before we transition into Emma Stone Cruella. We have the younger Cruella. Okay, yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I liked that concept rather than a straight novelization or junior novelization of the film. I just like that Disney keeps doing these...
It's like expanding the journey.
An extension novel. Like, hey, if you liked this movie, almost like fan fiction. Like,
yeah,
you're inspired by the film and the characters, and you're like, this takes place in that world with those characters. It may or may not be canon, but let's explore something. Like, what if this happened in between these scenes of the movie? So that's just, it made me think of that. I know we haven't done too many young adult, but I thought of that more so than a Twisted Tale, which might surprise you given that Twisted Tales are about villains, but those are very much like, this is not canon. This is just...
Yeah, this is what if we completely changed the story?
Yeah.
whereas this is like a mini episode. It's like, okay,
a tangent
I'm
off
super
of it
here. This is the animated series Clone Wars happening between episodes 2 and 3. Kind of a deal. Sorry, I'm on a Star Wars binge now. I've never watched the Clone Wars animated series, and now I'm starting. But it's kind of that same deal where it's its own thing. You don't have to watch it to know what's going on in the main plot, but they were like, let's add more and talk about this war that seems to wrap up in only 2 hours.
Yeah, that's just why I thought of this one reading it. Like, it seemed like a similar pitch concept, maybe as they were developing, like, hey, what do we want to do to tie into this film? Well, let's do something that young readers or, like teenage readers might enjoy, but it doesn't change what happens in the film. Like, let's immerse ourselves a little more in this world.
One more reference now that I'm thinking of. That
You're on fire with references.
Belle's Enchanted Christmas.
Yes! Which is a very confusing timeline, but absolutely, we got a whole direct-to-VHS sequel for that one. Very
or when
much
she's
so.
Still in the castle, but before the whole Gaston mob thing.
And before they even dance in her pretty yellow dress.
Yeah, so it's sometime happening. There's something there.
Yes.
Pause the song. Insert
this. That's very much how I felt reading this book. I was like, okay, this is the opening of the film. And pause. Now she's a teenager. And then you could then read the book and then pick up the film after she lifts her head up from the sink and her hair is red. And now she is Emma Stone. I feel like similar with Beauty and the Beast. I know it's been now 3 years since we've read that YA tie-in, but there's very much a point where you're like, all right, this is where that fits in that film as a tangent. So that was my own little tangent there. Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, but I see how that fits, and it is kind of fun. Oh, I'm reflecting now on the days when you said fan fiction. I used to be that person, tangent number 4 here, that went looking for Harry Potter fan fiction. And there were plenty of websites where people published these stories, and there were ones that were super popular.
I need to know what type of Harry Potter fan fiction you were interested in. Were you like an AU, a ship?
Okay. So when it comes to fan fiction, so something I like about this book, and like now reflecting back on Beauty and the Beast Lost in a Book, is that while it's a side story, it still completely fits with what is true. I don't like fan fictions as much as we like to imagine, like what would it have been like if Hermione and Draco Malfoy got together. I'm not a fan personally. They might be fun stories to read, but I'm like, but that's not what happens. So like maybe it's the historian in me, or chronologically, or facts. I don't know why. It just doesn't sit with me. And I apologize to all the Draco Hermione fans out there. They have their place. They have their fans. I'm happy it exists for you. It's just personally not my fave.
You like more like, I'm going to do extended adventures at Hogwarts.
Extended adventures kind of or prequels. Stuff that we have no info about at all. So then...
Like Harry Potter's parents.
Right. I loved the fan fictions of Moony, Padfoot, Wormtail, Prongs, like all of the Marauders together. Because we don't get a lot of that from J.K. Rowling. And while she has her own stuff, it's not in the book. So there's a lot more space to play. And for me, it's more plausible. So that's why when you made these descriptions, like I like side stories like this that are completely plausible and fit with the canon, even if they're not quote canon, they fit within what does exist.
Perfect. It was a tangent about books with tangents and you brought us back. But that was fun for me to learn about your fan fiction habits. But let's get into the official film and maybe some of the other films that led to that. So this will be our official spoiler warning for the film, though we did have some spoilers for the book there, so we'll just put spoiler warning in our show notes for sure.
Yeah. So if you are waiting to watch Cruella, take your pause now, go watch, and then come back to us, which will be right now. So Courtney, before we get into the film and its connection to Hello Cruel Heart, I want to make some space here to talk about your discussion with our podcast friend and previous guest on our episode 54, Jeff DePauli of Disney Coast to Coast, about the evolution of Cruella as a character. That was such a fun discussion and I think really relevant to where we're going to talk right now. So why don't you give us a little recap?
Sure, I don't want to give too much away, but it was so much fun. And thank you again to Jeff for asking me to join him on his show. I definitely encourage listeners to check out that episode if they haven't already, because we cover so much of Cruella's characterization, tracking her from the original children's novel by Dodie Smith to the classic animated feature, then the iconic Glenn Close live action adaptation, and this latest release with Emma Stone. So as a little sneak peek, I can tell you I came up with the 4 C's of Cruella that classify her across each of those, but you'll have to tune into the episode to find out just what exactly those are. We'll include a link to the show in these show notes. But as we turn our focus to the latest iteration that inspired the book, we are of course talking about Cruella starring Emma Stone, currently in theaters and available on Disney Plus via premium access. The film also stars Emma Thompson, Joel Fry, and Paul Walter Hauser. Directed by Craig Gillespie, the film premiered Memorial Day weekend, taking second place at the box office just behind A Quiet Place Part 2, and has received generally positive reviews. So let's get into our own. What were your overall impressions of the film?
So I think this ranks in probably my fave, maybe top 5, maybe top 3 live actions that Disney has done. I thought it was great. You had told me your review prior, because you did get to see it a week before me. And like you said, how you didn't want any excuses for her character, and you said the sass and strong female character play between Emma Thompson and Emma Stone. We got all of that. And I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I have to say this was something that I was definitely intrigued about, but a little apprehensive of going into. I don't speak for everyone, nor do I speak for the company. All views are my own, but I feel there's been some live action fatigue for audiences in terms of remakes, things of that nature. So when this was announced, I was kind of like, again, I don't know, not the biggest fan of Maleficent. I thought it was okay. I had fun watching it, but not one that I'd need to watch again or wouldn't rank among my live action adaptations. And if you listen to Jeff's episode, you'll hear that I am actually a big fan of Cruella. I know she's a really dark character, but that's part of what intrigues me about her. So I was like, what are they gonna do to her when they announced this? So I was very apprehensive of the film. But once the first trailer came out, which was only a few months ago, I feel like it was like, oh, that's coming out in June. I was intrigued. I'm like, I put in writing, this is what I want from the film. I sent it to my friend, and the film delivered on it for me. So I had a great time watching it. Absolutely loved the soundtrack. I'm sure we can get into that more, but this film blew me away. I'd really like to even see it in theaters. I was watching it at home with early access, but I'd love for Doug to see it and for us to have the cinematic experience of that.
Yeah, especially with that soundtrack, having that over some really loud surround sound speakers. I think you would get the adrenaline going when she has just those scenes where she's just crashing fashion show after fashion show with her own style.
And you watched it at home, right?
Yes, I did watch it at home also. I did the premiere access. It was just like, it was so amp. It was great. But something I'm thinking of what you just said of how Maleficent really was not your fave. I liked Maleficent. I would agree it's not one of my top favorites. But I think what maybe helped a little bit with Cruella is they didn't really touch the original film.
No, it doesn't try to rewrite anything.
Right, like
that's
in
it.
Maleficent, we get almost a new story for Sleeping Beauty, for Briar Rose herself.
That it's not Prince Aurora. Philip who wakes her up. Like,
right,
like oh, we've just changed the crux of this story.
But at the same time, it's not Lion King where we got the same film of things we already know. So I think it hit that happy medium of, we didn't touch things we already love about 101 Dalmatians. The animated film stands completely still on its own and distinctively separate from this. And I think going the prequel route is really the way to go, particularly the way they did Cruella, if we're going to do some more live actions. I'm a fan.
I may need to noodle on this and see it in cinemas, but I would go so far after my first viewing to say this is one of my top live actions for that reason. It was just so well done. I would say you could shave about 20 minutes off the film because it was a little long, but that's not to say it wasn't well paced, because it went from beat to beat, from song to song, almost like an extended music video for the 70s. I was just completely swept up in it, in the revenge plot, the dynamics between Emma Stone and Emma Thompson's characters. They're both such strong actresses that I felt really elevated this. But also kudos to Joel Fry and Paul Walter Hauser playing Jasper and Horace respectfully. We hinted at it a little early, but understated characters. I thought they were like very endearing in their relationship with Estella / Cruella.
And Horace is great. We're going to talk about the characters. But wow, he kind of stole the show for me in some scenes where I was like, yes.
But what's the angle?
But what's the angle? Wow, so good. And Wink, the largest rat you've ever seen. We'll talk about the characters, but relating this to the book, the first 10 to 15 minutes of the film is based in Hello, Cruel Heart. This is where we get 10, 11, 12-year-old Estella and some of that backstory that we also get in Cruel Heart. So what did you recognize from the film that links to the book?
We have different approaches with me having watched the film first. So I wasn't sure how much was going to happen. So when you were initially texting me that you were reading it and I hadn't started the book yet, I was like, I don't know what I can say to her. Like, I don't know how much information is in there. But it really was, that felt a bit junior novelization to me. Like, all right, let's quickly summarize what happens with her mother, how that all goes down, and how she meets Jasper and Horace to then propel us to this point in time. So that hit a lot of the same beats, but maybe a little accelerated and without the baller soundtrack.
Yeah, and I think the film, if you read the book first like I did, you recognize those moments that are from the book in that first 10, 15 minutes. But I think it almost made it clearer for me because at one point I texted you, I was like, wait, how did the mom die? You're like, how did you miss that? It's like right there in the beginning. And it's
in the book or the movie?
In the book. Okay. I was like, wait, how did she? Because I hadn't seen the film yet. So this
right,
was like me finishing the book and texting you because we were planning. And I was like, wait, how did the mom die? Didn't she just like get pushed? You're like,
she got yeeted off the cliff by Dalmatians.
But I think what the film does is that some of the stuff in the book that I get, it's that visual element because the mom dying, it was pretty quick in the book. Like we know she dies, but we're over it in a page. We move on.
And if you're like skim reading, I could see how you're like, wait, I need to back up for a moment. What exactly happened here?
And we're gonna talk about differences, Dalmatians that are never mentioned in Hello, Cruel Heart after that point. But with the film, even though it took up more space, so I think we get a bigger idea that her mom was more of a fixture point because in Hello, Cruel Heart, she doesn't really harp on her mother too much.
No, she seems to be past that loss. And you only get like a few paragraphs with her mom, if that.
But everything else lined up. Getting kicked out of school, struggling with bullies, but also trying to maintain her own personality and style. Mom believing in her and saying, fine, we're going to go to London then, where you might fit in amongst other people who love fashion and this scene as much as you do. Because they're kind of out in the countryside in a more, what you would, I guess, stereotypical, traditional English country boarding school kind of deal is where she was going to school. And then we get the mom stops to ask for money. We don't know where this connection comes from for this person's house that she stops at, which becomes a big focal point of the film. But not so much in Hello, Cruel Heart. And then we get to where she is by herself in London. So it summarizes the stuff you really need from Hello, Cruel Heart to get to the main plot points of Cruella very well.
Yeah, I felt it gave you just enough information that it doesn't likely take away from your movie experience. It sounded like it didn't for you. I think if, let's say, you saw this film and then wanted to read the book maybe months later, it's good to be like a little refresher of some elements. I mean, I don't think I'm going to forget the scene of her mom being thrown off the cliff. But I will say, do not judge the movie by the 30 seconds that you watched on Twitter, because it is so much more than that. But that's all I will say on that matter.
But I did kind of like reading the book first, because even though that info was kind of known to me already, because of the rest of the film and having that extended story of her preteen, young teen years, I had a deeper connection to her, or I cared more about her.
Yeah, how did you see the characters from the film evolve from their younger selves in the book?
So I like to think at the end of Hello, Cruel Heart, we see her go back to Jasper and Horace, and she's like, I've learned my lesson. And in fact, I kind of liked the twist at the end that she even has Magda and Richard's address book, and she's like, actually, let's go pull some heists with some of these rich people who stabbed me in the back. And we kind of see that beginning of revenge a little bit, but I like to think that, you know, she took the time now to better her skills. She has more fashion. That evolution where she's still pretty innocent, I would think, at the beginning of Cruella, even in those early days, but she hasn't lost her drive. And when she even goes to work for House of Baroness, we kind of see her fashion house. Kind of like how she did in Hello, Cruel Heart, that when she was put into this new world, she's like, I'm doing this the honest way. So I kind of see a repeat a little bit from her, where then
once she's pushed to a certain point, then
but also the
Cruella
truth reveals itself of the
out.
other people that she's trusted and they've betrayed her.
Mm-hmm.
Cruella comes out. So it's a reiteration of that, but I feel like you can tell she has more experience. You can tell that she's evolved from Hello, Cruel Heart, where she hasn't lost her faith in the world and in others, but she is a little more guarded.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that that would be a natural evolution. I mean, it's not explicitly stated in the book, but in the movie they say it's jumping 10 years. So I would guess that maybe the book that we're reading is 5 years in between there.
Yeah, that would
like,
make
let's
sense.
say if she's like 11 at the start, then she's 16, and then you have the other 5 years where the film picks up. So you are going to change a bit in those formative years, but still remain true to yourself in some ways. I thought Jasper and Horace were very similar. We get maybe an evolution of how they endear themselves to her and how they do care for her, but we get to see a falling out more so than we do in the film. But I guess that adds some nuance to how they feel slighted by her at points in the film, because if you're reading the book, you realize she's treated them this way before, almost getting caught up in other things.
And I guess in some ways those themes are kind of repeating themselves, because if you read the book, those themes are carried over into the film. So if you did read the book, you're like, oh, she's trusting, and then something happens. She relies on Jasper and Horace, and then she kind of turns on them a little bit. It kind of repeats in a way, but I think those are still those appropriate things that have to happen for her to understand Cruella. She has to, when she feels betrayed, she kind of betrays in return. She feels betrayed by the Baroness, but then she kind of puts Jasper and Horace in a bad place to get her, and that's kind of what perpetuates that character. Is she kind of does stay pretty focused on herself. She is, I would, as much as we do see some redemption if she goes back for Jasper and Horace later, it is still for her own purposes.
Yeah, she's selfish for sure.
But yeah, I do want to talk about Jasper and Horace though, because they're just so fun.
Sure. What else did you see there?
So this is kind of going into talking about some differences in the book. So I really liked, the film has more dogs in it. Whereas the book, we see the Dalmatians and we know she has a pet and we have Wink, but they just kind of hang at the house. They hang at the lair in the book. They're not part of the crew. And I really loved how they're like, no, 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 we're taking this dog that wears an eye patch and making him part of the crew. He is integral to the heists. And I love the relationship Horace has with Wink. It just makes it so much better when they do these ridiculous stunts to pull off a heist.
Yeah, they're very much an aside in the book. Like, if they took them out of the book, I don't think you'd even notice. Having seen the movie first, I could picture those two dogs, but you're absolutely right that Wink especially provides a lot of comic relief within the film and is such a cute character.
I think it was interesting to include the dogs too, because then when we think about Cruella as Cruella, it's not because she dislikes dogs. There's something more in there than just she dislikes dogs, because she has a great relationship with lots of other dogs throughout this film. So it's not just a dog thing. So I think that it makes it a little more nuanced or a little bit deeper of a motivation for her character in the animated film or Cruella in the 1996.
Which, again, we don't fully have, and I'm okay with that. So that's a good point as well. Not too many differences otherwise, though, because, again, this isn't something where we're like, oh, we're reading the Dodie Smith book that inspired the animated film and then comparing the animated film, which Jeff and I do a little bit on Disney Coast to Coast. Again, it's more of a tangential book. So I think, what we've done with the characters here really is the similarities and differences, because you're not comparing the same plot point at all once you're past that prologue.
I think a character that we have to talk about is the Baroness. We have to talk about Emma Thompson's character, because that was what stood out the most to me. And I think this is why, huge spoiler here, guys. If you've been sticking with us and you're like, I feel like I haven't spoiled anything yet, stop now. When her, quote, mother dies in the book, it was like, it seemed so random to me. Like, okay, why they were at a party, she's asking someone for money and resources, but then she gets attacked by a dog and dies. Like, it seems very out of the blue, but when you know that it's the Baroness she's talking to, and the Baroness who, spoiler now, calls the Dalmatians to attack her, it makes so much, it's more, I don't know, it's more cruel. It's more, it has a lot more
Hello,
motivation.
cruel heart.
Right, and I wasn't, like, in the book, I was like, okay, this is why she doesn't like Dalmatians. I get that. They killed her mom. But
it's more than that.
Right. So I feel like that's something that the film does. And if you're reading the book, that's a big difference, because you don't know who, they never mention, I don't think, the Baroness at all in the book. They just say she talked to somebody.
That's what I was about to say. I think it's more of a missed opportunity, because later in the beginning of the film, as she's full-grown Emma Stone, Estella, you see a billboard for House of Baroness. We're establishing that there is this fashion designer that Estella admires and wants to emulate. I feel like that could have been mentioned in maybe towards the end of this tie-in book. Just, she's already in this high society world, even if it's like a throwaway line like, oh, I really admire the Baroness of House Baroness. That would have been a nice way to further affirm that connection and Estella's interest in that part of the fashion world.
Yeah, because, and then once I made that realization watching the film, the book, I was like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense now. So yeah, I agree what you said, like those missed opportunities to just make that connection.
Yeah, I think the book didn't want to give away too much in that prologue, so they kept it purposely vague. You kind of see it visually in the film, but it makes sense to me that they wouldn't want to draw that parallel, but I think just having that character mentioned later on would have been a nice juxtaposition. But speaking of juxtapositions, I would like to know what you think Hello, Cruel Heart and Cruella connect more to, the animated film or the 1996 live-action 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close?
To me, it connects more to the animated film.
Oh. We have different
and
opinions
I'm going to
here.
pull a little bit here from your discussion with Jeff DePauli, and it's the relationship with Anita that first makes me, that was one of the first that I feel like it's more pulled to the animated film. So in Cruella, Anita and Estella, we see them very briefly, but we see them as schoolmates. Whereas in the 1996 film, that is not a thing. They were not schoolmates. And then we see that Anita, in their grown-up world, she is a reporter, and she helps Cruella get on the scene because she's in a newspaper that kind of doesn't have a lot of followers. Cruella sees her at a Baroness event, and she goes, "I'll get you some readers if you exclusively talk about these crazy fashion stunts I'm going to pull." And that's kind of how they develop their bond. And I see that more connecting to the animated film because, kind of like what you said with Jeff, they're not great friends, but they have a bond there. So yes, they say your old schoolmate, but what is it that's tying them together? Because they really weren't like best of best friends. It was like the one person that just kind of was like, yeah, you can sit with me at lunch, Estella. Maybe they didn't confine each other or have the sleepovers, but Anita was nice to her. So I saw that a little bit better. So that was the first one that connected it for me. And then just some of the references were more, I think, to the animated film. Like, I loved the reference where Horace says, "Doesn't it look like some dogs look like their owners?" And I was like, that's exactly what happens. And that's what is the animated film. So just some of those little things fit for me. And pretty much everything for me lines up except for the fact that Roger worked for Cruella. That's the only lynch in my connection to the animated film, is that Roger, quote, also knew in the film he's her lawyer before she fires him. But that, for me, I felt like it went more to the animated film.
So I think it's supposed to just stand completely on its film. I think especially in some of the characterizations and casting, but you make a great point there with Anita and that relationship. I went to the 1996 live action 101 Dalmatians immediately, and I think this is just more of like my brain putting timelines. I was like, okay, if this takes place in the 1970s, it checks out that. And again, I don't think it's its own thing. Like, it's more just exploring this. Like, we're not saying this is the prequel and leads directly to the Glenn Close film. But my brain was like, well, if she's, in her 20s in the 1970s, then I guess it checks out that by the mid 90s, she's Glenn Close, Cruella de Vil, and she has established herself as this fashion designer. So I went with that aspect of the character. She's a designer. She goes from House Baroness to House de Vil in the Glenn Close. But
I didn't even think the names were similar. You're right.
And because the 1996 takes place in that time period. They updated that Roger's a computer game designer. Like, that film has been 90s written all over it in its technology, in its settings, like background type stuff. So I was like, well, that timeline checks out to me, but I would not, like, I'm fine with this thing standing on its own.
I thought about the timeline thing too, because the animated film was made in 1961, and from everything we have read about animation history, it was supposed to be Disney's first contemporary film taking place in present day, which would make it the 60s, not the 70s or 80s. But they also never name the year in 101 Dalmatians. So I was like, it could be 1979.
That's fair. But then
when this takes place in 1971 or
she
2.
looks so much older in the animated film. That's why I bring this up with Jeff. I don't know what's in her cigarette thing that she's smoking, but if her and Anita are schoolmates, her skin is awful and she should have invested in moisturizer.
I think you're right. It is supposed to kind of stand on its own and just be an origin story of her. But I did like some of the tie-ins, like I said, again, to the animated film. And we kind of also get that end credit scene where we know where Pongo and Perdita come from.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. But I liked the movie overall. But I was like, what is
it gave us
saying?
A little bit more Dalmatian that way, too.
Yes,
because
but why?
More. Although from Hello, Cruel Heart and Cruella, or especially Cruella, at the end, the Dalmatians come from the Baroness, and she basically kidnaps them first, but they love her.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
I'm okay.
I'm still curious where I guess this is again that tie-in to the 96 film where you're making a strong argument here, because then when she sees it as fashion, maybe she loved the dog, had no issues with Dalmatians before, but then that madness of seeing it in this breathtaking fashion as a print, now she's got to have it. And that all goes out the window.
I still have questions, but I'm okay that I have questions. Overall, I liked the journey that both this new film and this book took us on with Estella and Cruella's character.
Me too. It felt like a nice arc. I had a book to read, followed by a film, and then I watched I watched both the animated and live action right after. So it felt like a nice, complete, it's a collection now. 101 Dalmatians has a collection now. That's very cool.
Well, plenty of resources then. What would you recommend for listeners who would like to continue on this journey?
So I would recommend, since we read this novel and we have gone down junior novelizations, there is a novelization of Cruella out, and I haven't read it, but I would be curious to see what from the film and how that book line up, or do we get a little bit more information on something? So I think that would be fun, that if you really enjoyed reading Hello, Cruel Heart and seeing Cruella, also pick up the novelization of Cruella.
Yeah, and again, gonna plug my appearance on Disney Coast to Coast. That episode came out about 2 weeks ago. It is season 8, episode 17, where I dive into Cruella's history with Jeff. We'll have that linked in our show notes, but also in my preparation for that episode, and then tangentially this, lots of great bonus features. I have the Walt Disney Signature edition of 101 Dalmatians, the animated feature, but I'm sure they're available on YouTube. There's one about Mark Davis, Cruella in his own words, where Mark Davis, one of Walt's 9 Old Men animators, kind of discusses bringing that character to life, and also just another feature of other animators and producers and Disney artists discussing what Cruella means to them as a villain. So even more about who this villain is and what she means to everyone.
I'm so proud you said, or happy you talked about bonus features. So I don't think you've had a chance to plug your beloved bonus features in a while.
I haven't in a while. You're right. If you're new to the show, when we get to our resources, I do love me some bonus features.
And I guess another resource we could throw out too is you did read the original book by Dodie Smith, which is on our list, listeners. It might be, I don't know, episode 101 in the future.
Makes sense.
But you could read it ahead of time, that if you are looking for that evolution of Cruella, you can go on the journey that Courtney did, read the Dodie Smith novel, which is not very long, and then read Hello, Cruel Heart, move on to Cruella, and then watch the animated and original live action from 96 and kind of get that full arc of Cruella.
It was a really fun journey, and we will be embarking on our next one soon. We are once again immersing ourselves in the art of Disney thanks to our friends at Chronicle Books. We're going to discuss The Art of Raya and the Last Dragon in honor of its wider availability on Disney Plus this month. So here's a description of the book from Amazon. Quote, "With never-before-seen development art, character sketches, storyboards, and color scripts, The Art of Raya and the Last Dragon gives fans a front-row view of the making of the Walt Disney Animation Studios animated feature," end quote. So that'll be fun to dip back into the art and another film tie-in again. And be sure to stay tuned to the end of the month when we will kick off our Sinister Summer series with 4 volumes of Tales from the Haunted Mansion. We'll be covering those over 2 episodes this summer as our little themed treat for you, and then continue on through the rest of the year. To keep up with what we're reading and when our episodes are released, be sure to follow Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse. We always welcome emails with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. And if you can leave us a review on iTunes so others can find the podcast and read and listen along with us, we greatly appreciate it. If you want to keep up with me, Courtney, I'm on Instagram at GreatGuthsby and on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on both Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, at Emily_McD.
Great. Well, this has been a pleasure. Usually we let our guest readers do the honors of picking a quote, but when it's just the two of us, one of us gets to do it. So Emily, it is your turn. What have you picked to close us out today?
So it's not a quote. I actually chose a short passage from the end of Hello, Cruel Heart, where Estella has learned those harsh lessons about her fake friendships and gives in a little bit to the infamous alter ego Cruella that we know. So I think this was a really good transition and stood out to me because it really sets us up for Cruella, the film, and we're hoping that all of you are going to go watch it. So here we go. I tried to tell you, Cruella said, facing for the second time that day. None of this was for you. Love, friendship, those are weak ideas made up by weak people. Strong people, geniuses, they work alone. They believe in no one and nothing but themselves. Estella did not tell Cruella to go away. She didn't tell her to stop talking. I take over from here. Just you and me. You could be something great. Something those rich morons could never be. Trust me, I have never lied to you. I have always looked out for your best interest. See what happens when you ignore me? All right, Cruella, Estella said out loud. You win.
Very nice. It is setting us right up to the film. So I would love to go revisit it. I encourage listeners to do the same, and we'll see you next time. The Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.